This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. Donald Trump's going to be indicted again later this week with a surrender and an arrest and an arraignment early next week if Jack Smith stays true to form based on the Mar-a-Lago indictment. We know that, of course, for the earlier reporting today. Target letter, let's just go through the steps. Target letter, come in, invitation to grand jury, which will be rejected by Donald Trump. Then a possible meeting with the lawyers for Donald Trump, which we expect to be Todd Blanche and Chris Kise. That will also not succeed in dissuading the flinty prosecutor, Jack Smith, the guy that has the Subway sandwich literally under his arm and his lunch pail in his other hand, just doing his job. And so then we'll have the indictment on Thursday or Friday by the grand jury in District of Columbia for a D.C. future trial. One trial down in South Florida, maybe Fort Pierce, maybe Miami, and this other trial centered in the District of Columbia. Whole different jury pool in the District of Columbia, not favorable to Donald Trump. The harder case is the Jan 6 case, the fake elector scandal, the criminal conspiracy, the insurrection type charges. And fortunately for Jack Smith, he's calculated that he'd like to try that case in the District of Columbia, not in Miami. We'll see what judge is assigned to that as the week progresses. Now, who else is a target? Who else is a cooperator? Who else is if not a co-defendant now, a co-defendant in the future? Because let's watch Jack Smith in action. And we already have the rehearsal in the Mar-a-Lago indictment. He didn't name everybody that was involved in the Mar-a-Lago hidden document, purloined National Defense Information Document scandal, the Espionage Act case. Does anybody really believe it's just Walt Nauta and Donald Trump? No, it's Donald Trump first, Walt Nauta a close second, but he's the little buddy to Donald Trump's skipper. And then there's a bunch of other people that if they're not going to cooperate with the federal government and Jack Smith, they're going to be added. Their names are going to be added to that list as indicted co-conspirators when Jack Smith gets around to doing a superseding indictment, which is an amended indictment. That's Mar-a-Lago. Same thing's going to happen here. I predict that Jack Smith's, when we see the indictment later this week, let's say it's unsealed on Friday or on Monday or in court by Monday, Tuesday, when there's a surrender, an arrest, surrender, and arraignment all over again. Donald Trump must be getting very good at this. This will now be his third time doing this. He's getting like his golf game. He's not getting better at his golf game, but he's least experienced. He can find his way, into the courthouse with his eyes blindfolded. So we know that's going to happen later this week. The question is, what is that indictment going to look like? I already did a hot take on what a proposed federal prosecution memo outlining the charges would look like. The easiest case for him to bring right now for Jack Smith and get this off the ground on the bigger corruption, toppling democracy case, right, is the fake electors, at least being at center of the new case. The use of the fake electors, John Eastman, Peter Navarro, Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, all thick as thieves in that conspiracy to create a set of parallel phony electors, then have them sign it, send it into the National Archive, send that set of phony electoral certificates from 7 battleground states, including Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, and the like. Well, not Florida because he already had Florida, Georgia for certain, and send them to awaiting Mike Pence, right? Awaiting co-conspirator Mike Pence, who would then not recognize the legitimate electoral certificates giving Biden the presidency, but recognizing these phony ones or delaying the events, except Mike Pence either didn't get the memo or didn't want at least his chapter in the history books to say that he was a traitor. I think he still holds out hope that he'll be president of the United States one day, Mike Pence, although, newsflash, Mike, spoiler alert, not happening. But in any event, who else could be indicted along with Donald Trump, if not in the first wave this week, then in the subsequent superseding indictment, amended indictment that the federal government is bound to make? Why, first of all, Why do they do that? Why do they bring a simpler, maybe 30, 40, 50, 100 count indictment and then bring a later indictment which supersedes the earlier one? For a number of reasons. One, it is a signal to less than cooperative witnesses that they better start cooperating and stop jerking the chain of the federal government and the prosecutors and the FBI and get on the train, or they're going to be thrown under it. And what better way to do that is if you're at the next meeting with a bullheaded witness who the government wants them to cooperate and flip on Donald Trump, but they've been holding out because who knows, they think he might become president and they want him to, give him a great job. And they say, hey, have you seen the indictment? You see this name under here? Donald Trump and a couple of other people? That'll be you the next time. Now sit in that chair and tell us everything you know about Donald Trump. That is the main reason. Sometimes it's also because they're continuing to develop evidence. And let's give Jack Smith all the credit that's due. He's only been in his chair 9 months. And in 9 months, he's got 2 major indictments of a former president. That's a land speed record for criminal justice, I assure you. Watergate was 2-3 years. Yes, people went to jail, but they went to jail 2, 3, 4 years later. Jack Smith indictment 9 months after he got the job, 2 indictments. And there's more coming. So he gets the case with less moving parts, with maybe 2 or 3 co-defendants along with it. He then uses that as a cudgel to get the other witnesses to cooperate. He then brings a broader case, but he's already got him indicted. He's got his judge. He knows what's happening in that courthouse, in that courtroom, and he's in complete control at that point, Jack Smith. And he can bring the superseding indictment anytime he wants. The other reason, as I started to say, you sometimes see superseding indictments is when they're continuing to develop evidence and witnesses. But really here, that's not the issue, because between the Jan 6 committee and all of that body of work that ultimately Jack Smith inherited and got copies of and spoke to those same witnesses and others, I don't think it's a matter of, I want to talk to more people. I think he's done. The grand jury is sort of cooked and baked when it comes to taking in witnesses and evidence. They have, I'm sure, 150 terabytes of information they can now use against Donald Trump, and we'll see a lot of it in the indictment. So who are the other people? Now that I got you at the edge of your seat in this hot take, 2 of them we know. They're either cooperating witnesses completely, unindicted co-conspirators, or they've been threatened with being indicted if they don't cooperate. Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani. Mark Meadows, we believe here on Legal AF, has been given close to full immunity to cooperate against Donald Trump. He has his own criminal liability exposure problem because he's been in the thick of it for everything. He was the number one enabler number one for all of Donald Trump's worst and darkest instincts. He was he was there for and supported and helped develop the fake elector scheme. He was there in the White House. He heard Donald Trump refuse to accept defeat. He knows about all the fraudulent representations made by Donald Trump in order to raise money. He knows that independent consultants told Donald Trump that there was no fraud in the election to overturn the election. He was there for all that. He was on the phone when Donald Trump called a number of states trying to pressure them to turn to steal the election from Joe Biden, including in Georgia. And he could be indicted for any or all of those things unless he cooperates. So we think Mark Meadows is pretty well cooked and cooperating. He'll be listed as an unindicted co-conspirator number something, but he won't be indicted. Giuliani, I think, is on a knife's edge. I think he's gone in twice now to testify under oath and give a proffer to Jack Smith. That's for sure. That's happened in the last 2 weeks. Rudy Giuliani was the captain of Team Crazy or Team Abnormal, which went out into the world and filed 70 different lawsuits to try to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And he went 0-70, is about to lose his law license for a second time. And but he ran with Sidney Powell, this whole, black ops campaign in order to try to get Donald Trump the presidency. And he knew or should have known at the time that all of the comments, statements, and filings that he made in courthouses were an assault on democracy, and none of it was true. Rudy's spoken twice to them under what's called a limited immunity, meaning they won't prosecute him for whatever Rudy said out of his own mouth on the 2 days that he went in to talk to them. But they can prosecute him for other facts that have been independently developed against him, and they've told him that. Now, I think right now, if reporting is correct, he hasn't, unlike Donald Trump, who got a target letter on Sunday night. As of right now, in this reporting, Rudy Giuliani has not been technically told that he is a target. It's not because the Department of Justice and Jack Smith doesn't have a shed load, that's a legal term, of evidence that could fill several tractor trailers and several lengths of trains of material and evidence against Rudy Giuliani. They do. But they would rather have him inside the tent cooperating than outside the tent. And to bring him over the wall, they'll say to him, we're going to indict this week Donald Trump. Your name was in a draft of that indictment, Mr. Giuliani. Now they're talking to his lawyers and him. It could easily have been you. We're going to give you one more shot to come clean completely, if you're capable of doing that, and tell us everything we want to know about all of the links in the chain of the conspiracy that Donald Trump promulgated from the beginning, from before the election, when he was trying to cast doubt on the election's integrity in case he lost, which he did, all the way through the night of the election, after the election, all the way through Jan 6, and everything in between and everything since. And if you know anything about Mar-a-Lago, you can throw that in too. That's Rudy Giuliani. So again, I don't think we see Rudy Giuliani. He may be mentioned as an unindicted currently, co-conspirator number blank, but not indicted. But I'm sure he was threatened about an earlier draft of the indictment to try to motivate him to start telling the truth. Mark Meadows, I think, has a deal already. Who else? Who else is in the crosshairs that we could see in either the indictment that will be unsealed early next week or at some other time with a superseding indictment? Boris Epshteyn, for sure. Lawyer for Donald Trump still. Insider, fixer. They've always said he's an enabler. He helps make sure that Donald Trump's worst thoughts and worst decision-making gets implemented and executed. That's Boris Epshteyn. He's been in every room as well. His phone was picked up 8 months ago in Operation Coconut by Jack Smith, in which 5 or 6 lawyers for Donald Trump had their cell phones, text messages, emails, private hopes and dreams picked up and have been reviewed by a taint team, a filter team by the Department of Justice and Jack Smith, which they name Operation Coconut, which a lot of people think sounds like co-conspirators who are nuts, and that becomes Coconut. So Boris Epshteyn, lawyer for Donald Trump. If he's not in this indictment, he'll be in the next one. Ken Cheeseborough, another lawyer with Donald Trump, Department of Justice, also helped execute the fake elector scheme and the weaponization of the Department of Justice when Donald Trump took it over, compromised its independence to try to use it as a tool to cling to power. John Eastman. John Eastman came out today along with Rudy Giuliani's lawyer and said, well, I'm not a target. I didn't get the target letter. It's coming. It's in the mail. The check's in the mail, and so is the target letter, John. Because if John Eastman isn't a target now as the absent-minded constitutional scholar, too smart by half, who developed the fake elector scheme and the pressure campaign on Mike Pence in order to overthrow democracy, right? And he's already been found through a case in California in the Central District, brought by the Jan 6 committee to get his cell phones and his text messages. A judge there already determined that he committed, more likely than not, a crime. So will Jack Smith. Now, there's been no reporting that John Eastman is cooperating. So if he's not in here as the architect of the fake elector scheme, then they're going to use the indictment to do the same thing I said they're doing with Giuliani. John Eastman, we had another draft of this indictment. It had your name on it. And it's going to be superseded in the next 2 weeks unless you come in from the cold and start cooperating. Because John Eastman would be a major get for Jack Smith and his team of investigators. Sidney Powell, same thing. Lawyer, out of control lawyer. They almost made her the special counsel in the waning days of December and January before Donald Trump finally left the White House, in a helicopter reminiscent of, Nixon leaving or the fall of Saigon, that. So Sidney Powell, certainly her role in bringing all of these bogus lawsuits around the country, trying to have Donald Trump and pressuring President Trump at the time to declare martial law, to appoint her special counsel, to confiscate election equipment, and to suspend the Constitution and writs of habeas corpus. That's what's going to be written on Sidney Powell's tombstone. But she's definitely either in this indictment or going to be in the next indictment. Jeffrey Clark, same thing. Jeff Clark, number 3 in the Department of Justice. Donald Trump saw him as a kindred spirit, somebody who was loyal to him, and he was willing to weaponize the Department of Justice, and he wrote letters on DOJ letterhead that he was going to mail out to legislators and elected officials and secretaries of state in different battleground states to try to convince them that there was fraud in the election when there was not. If it wasn't for Pat Cipollone, the lawyer, general counsel, White House counsel for Donald Trump, who put a stop to it, those letters would have went out. Jeff Clark, there's an indictment with your name on it. And of course, Peter Navarro, one of the other architects of the Green Bay sweep is what they called it, the fake elector scheme. So we're going to see Meadows and Giuliani, I believe, being listed in the next indictment we see this week as unindicted co-conspirators. Giuliani for now, but a threat against him, I'm sure, that if he doesn't cooperate, he's going to go into the next draft. Boris Epshteyn, I think, is either in this draft or in the next one. Ken Cheeseborough, same. John Eastman, same. Sidney Powell, Jeff Clark, and then also Mike Flynn, already convicted of crimes, had been pardoned by Donald Trump, but he'll be convicted, I believe, or indicted again. There's no way, given the amount of evidence we know Jack Smith has against all the people that I just listed, that he's going to give them a free pass. He might file initially a narrow indictment like he did in Mar-a-Lago with just 1 or 3 people in it. But he will use that as a tool, as a weapon, right, to get cooperating witnesses to cooperate with them, or they're going to be in the next indictment. We'll follow all of that, just like I do only on the MeidasTouch Network on hot takes and explainers just like this one. And then we pull it together on our podcast Wednesdays and Saturdays, Legal AF on the MeidasTouch Network. And you can follow me, Michael Popok, on all things social media at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.